The scorching sun beat down on my face as Mr. Mitchell pushed me out of the wagon. My legs trembled as I touched the dusty ground of that isolated property. It was the end of a journey that had started 3 days earlier when he woke me up in the middle of the night saying he'd found someone willing to take me. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. This here is Clara, Mitchell said to the tall man waiting for us on the porch. Hard worker, doesn't complain about a thing. The only problem is she can't bear children. That's why she's available for a fair price. I lowered my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of shame. At 25, I had already been through 3 different families. It was always the same story. I'd arrive full of hope, work until I was exhausted, but when they found out about my condition, I was sent away like a broken object that was no longer useful. The man in front of me was named Nathan. His brown eyes carried a sadness I recognized immediately. It wasn't the look of contempt I was used to seeing. It was something different, something that felt familiar. "Can she cook?" Nathan asked, his voice hoarse as if it wasn't used much. "Yes, sir. Cooks, cleans, takes care of the animals. Everything a woman should do, except—" Mitchell didn't finish the sentence, but we all knew what he meant. Nathan nodded and handed a few coins to Mitchell. I had been sold again. This time to a man who looked like he was carrying the whole world on his shoulders. "You can go," Nathan said to Mitchell, without taking his eyes off me. When the wagon disappeared down the dusty road, we were alone. Nathan looked at me for a moment too long, as if he were trying to figure out something that even I didn't understand. "The house is over there," he pointed to a simple wooden building. "There's a room in the back where you can sleep. Breakfast at 5, lunch at noon, dinner when the sun goes down." I walked in silence to the house, carrying my only belonging. A small bag with 2 changes of clothes and a wooden comb that had belonged to my mother. The property was larger than I had imagined, but it had an air of neglect that saddened me. The barn needed repairs, the fence was broken in several places, and there was a small, overgrown grave in the back of the house. My new room was small but clean, a bed, a table, a chair, and a cracked mirror on the wall. It was more than I had expected. I put my things on the table and stood there for a few minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. On the first day, I woke up before sunrise. I've always been like that. Since I was a child, my body naturally woke up early, as if it knew there was work to be done. I walked to the kitchen and found everything covered in a thin layer of dust. The pans were clean, but stacked messily. The pantry had the basics: flour, beans, some pieces of dried meat, eggs from the backyard chickens. I started making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, strong coffee. The smell of food filled the silent house, and promptly at 5 o'clock, Nathan appeared in the kitchen. His hair was messy, and he was wearing the same clothes as the day before. "Thank you," he said simply before sitting down at the table. We ate in silence. Me standing, leaning against the stove, him sitting facing the window that looked out over the fields. When he finished, Nathan stood up, grabbed his hat, and left without another word. I heard the sound of his footsteps fading until they disappeared completely. I spent the day exploring the house and figuring out what needed to be done. It was clear Nathan had been living alone for a long time. Clothes thrown everywhere, dirty dishes piled up, spiderwebs in the corners. But there was something else in the house, a feeling that other people had lived there. A forgotten doll under a bed, a woman's dress hanging in the closet, a comb with long strands of hair still tangled in it. When the sun began to set, I prepared dinner. Nathan returned with the same punctuality as in the morning, ate in silence, and disappeared again. This routine repeated for days without change. For the first few weeks, Nathan and I existed in the same space like 2 shadows that barely touched. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of the house. He worked in the fields, fixed fences, and cared for the animals. Our only interactions were during meals, always in silence. But I watched. It was something I always did well, observing people without them noticing. Nathan carried a deep pain. I saw it in the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking, in the way he avoided certain parts of the house, in the way his eyes would get distant during meals. One afternoon, while sweeping the yard, I noticed the small grave I had seen on the first day. It was completely overgrown with weeds. Two small wooden crosses, already worn by time, marked the spot. One had the name Victoria carved on it, the other Emma. Next to the grave, there was a rose bush that was dying. Its leaves were yellow and withered, its branches dry and broken. Something inside me stirred. I couldn't just ignore those roses. Over the next few days, whenever Nathan left for work, I would walk to the grave. At first, just to look. Then, I started carefully pulling out the weeds, being careful not to damage the crosses. The roses were in critical condition, but there was still life in them. I started watering them with water from the kitchen, pruning the dead branches, loosening the soil around them. I did it all in silence, as if it were a secret between me and those two people I had never known. Nathan never said anything about what I was doing, but I knew he had noticed. Sometimes, when he came back from the fields, I would see him looking toward the grave before going inside. His eyes would get even sadder in those moments, but there was no anger there. Just a deep melancholy that I recognized because I felt something similar. One night, after weeks of silence, Nathan spoke to me for the first time beyond the usual thank yous and good mornings. Victoria was my wife, he said, standing at the kitchen door while I was washing the dishes. Emma was our daughter. She was 4. I stopped washing the dishes and turned to look at him. Nathan's eyes were fixed on the table, his hands clasped together. There was an epidemic here in the region 3 years ago. A lot of people died. They were the first in our house. His voice trembled slightly. Victoria loved those roses. She planted them when Emma was born, said they would grow along with our little girl. I said nothing. There were no words for a moment like that. I just dried my hands on my apron and kept listening. After they were gone, I couldn't take care of anything anymore. The house, the fields, the roses, everything started to die along with me. Nathan looked up and met my eyes. Until you came, I felt something strange in my chest, a mix of sadness and something I couldn't identify. Nathan kept talking. I saw you taking care of their grave, of the roses. I don't know why you did it, but... He paused as if the words were too hard to find. Thank you. That night, lying in my small bed, I thought about Victoria and Emma. I imagined what life in that house must have been like when they were alive. The sound of laughter, conversations during meals, the smell of fresh roses drifting in through the windows. Nathan must have been a very different man back then. In the following days, something changed between us. Nathan started talking more during meals. Small things about work, about the weather, about the animals. I still answered more with gestures than with words, but he seemed to understand my silent language. You don't talk much, he said one Saturday morning while we were having coffee. I shrugged. I've always been this way. Words never came easily to me, especially after years of being treated as if my voice didn't matter. It's okay, Nathan continued. Sometimes silence is better than words. It was the first time in a long time that someone had said that to me. The first time someone didn't make me feel like my silence was another flaw to be fixed. As the days went by, I started to notice small changes in Nathan. He was shaving more often. His clothes were cleaner. He started fixing things around the house that had been broken for years. The barn got new planks, the fence was mended, the windows that wouldn't open worked again, and the roses were blooming. Small green buds appeared first. Then they turned into pale pink flowers that filled the yard with their sweet scent. Nathan spent hours standing by the grave, just watching the flowers sway in the wind. Victoria would be happy, he said one afternoon when he found me watering the roses. She always said that flowers knew when they were loved. I smiled at him. It was a small smile, but it was the first one I had offered anyone in a long time. Nathan smiled back, and for a moment, the sadness in his eyes lessened. We started to work together on small projects. I would hold the boards while he hammered. He would carry the buckets of water while I tended to the garden I had started next to the roses. Our hands would occasionally touch when we passed tools to each other, and I noticed that Nathan no longer pulled away when it happened. One evening, I made a special dinner. I had found some apples in the abandoned orchard at the back of the property and made a pie. The sweet smell filled the entire house, and Nathan appeared in the kitchen before I even called him. It's been a long time since I've smelled that, he said, inhaling deeply. Victoria used to make apple pie on Sundays. Instead of getting sad at the mention of his wife, Nathan smiled. It was a melancholy smile, but there was something else there, something that looked like peace. During dinner, Nathan told me more about his life before the epidemic, how he had met Victoria at a party in town, how Emma had been a child full of energy who kept him up all night, how they used to have picnics in the orchard on Sundays. Emma would have liked you, he said, cutting a slice of pie. She liked quiet people, said they kept the best secrets. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt that maybe there was a place for me in that house, not as a maid or an obligation, but as someone who truly belonged there. The following weeks brought a different routine to our small property. Nathan was no longer just the quiet man who showed up for meals. He started to include me in decisions about the farm, asking my opinion on where to plant new vegetables or how to reorganize the barn. His questions were simple, but to me, they meant everything. No one had ever asked me what I thought about anything. "What do you think about planting potatoes in that corner?" he asked one morning, pointing to a patch of land near the orchard. "The soil looks good over there." I walked over to the spot and knelt to feel the earth between my fingers. It was soft, dark, full of life. I nodded enthusiastically, and Nathan smiled in that way that was becoming more common lately. We worked side by side planting the seedlings. Nathan dug the holes while I placed the seeds and covered them with dirt. Our hands got dirty together, and I found that I liked it, the feeling of creating something new, of working with someone who valued my effort. During one of our work afternoons, Nathan started telling me stories about the region. How his grandparents had arrived there when he was just a child, how he had built the house with his own hands after marrying Victoria, how the local community had helped each other during tough times. "This land has seen a lot of suffering," he said, wiping the sweat from his brow, "but it's also seen a lot of joy. Victoria used to say that the land has a memory, that it remembers everything we plant in it, both the tears and the laughter." His words touched me deeply. I thought of all the tears I had shed over the years, in all the places where I wasn't accepted. Maybe this land could remember good things too. Maybe it could remember me as someone who brought life, not just someone who couldn't create it. One afternoon, while Nathan was working in the distant field, I decided to organize the house better. I had noticed that some of Victoria's clothes were still in the closet, dusty and forgotten. I didn't know if Nathan wanted to keep them there, or if he just hadn't found the courage to deal with them. I picked up each piece carefully, feeling the soft fabric between my fingers. They were beautiful, well-cared-for dresses, the kind a woman would wear on Sundays or for special occasions. One of them still had a faint, almost imperceptible scent, but one I could smell when I brought it close to my face. Nathan found me holding one of the dresses when he returned from the field. I braced myself for his discomfort or anger, but he just stood at the door and watched me for a long moment. "She was about your size," he finally said. "Victoria, you would have been the same height." I carefully put the dress back in the closet, but Nathan shook his head. "You don't have to put it away if you don't want to. Actually," he hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Actually, I think Victoria would be happy if someone wore her clothes again. She always said clothes were made to be worn, not to be kept in closets." I felt my heart speed up. The idea of wearing Victoria's clothes felt both too intimate and perfectly natural. Nathan must have noticed my hesitation because he continued. "You don't have many clothes, and these are just collecting dust," Victoria would have insisted. He smiled with a sweet sadness. She always took care of everyone around her. That night, I tried on one of Victoria's dresses. It was a light blue dress with small embroidered flowers on the collar. It fit me perfectly, as if it had been made especially for my body. When I looked at myself in the cracked mirror in my room, I saw a version of myself I didn't recognize, a woman who looked like she belonged somewhere. The next morning, I wore the dress to make breakfast. Nathan stopped completely when he saw me, his coffee cup suspended in midair. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Truly beautiful." I felt my face heat up at the compliment. How long had it been since someone called me beautiful? Maybe never. I looked down, but Nathan kept talking. Victoria would be happy to know her clothes are being worn by someone who takes care of this house with so much affection. In the following weeks, I started wearing Victoria's clothes regularly. Nathan seemed to appreciate it, always commenting on how nice they looked on me or how Victoria would have liked to see me in a particular dress. Gradually, I started to feel less like an intruder in his house and more like someone who actually lived there. Nathan also started to show me more of the property. We walked the full extent of the land, him explaining where everything had been planted over the years, showing me landmarks his family had established decades before. "That's where my grandfather built the first fence," he said, pointing to wooden posts already worn by time. "And over there is where Victoria and I planted our first tree after we got married. It was a large, strong apple tree, heavy with small but sweet fruit. Nathan picked a few apples and offered them to me. We ate in silence, sitting under the tree's shade, watching the field stretch to the horizon. You know, Clara," Nathan said after a long silence, "when Mitchell brought you here, I didn't expect this." "What?" I asked, surprised by the sound of my own voice. I hadn't spoken much in the last few weeks, and the word came out hoarser than I expected. Nathan looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. There was surprise there, but also something deeper. "I didn't expect you to bring life back to this house. To me." He looked at his hands as if the words were hard to form. "For the last 3 years, I've just been existing. Waking up, working, eating, sleeping. It was all automatic, like I was just a body running without a soul." I stopped chewing my apple, completely focused on his words. "But you brought something different. The way you care for things, how you look at everything with such attention. Victoria's roses are more beautiful than they've ever been. The house is full of life again. He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm starting to feel alive again." I felt tears forming in my eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to me. My whole life, I was seen as a problem to be solved, a burden to be carried. But Nathan was telling me I had brought life to his existence. "Nathan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Yes? You brought life to me, too." It was the most honest truth I had ever spoken. Nathan didn't see me as flawed or useless. He saw me as a whole person, valuable, capable of contributing and caring. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. That afternoon, we worked together fixing a section of the fence that had fallen during the last storm. Nathan held the boards while I hammered the nails. It was a job that required coordination and mutual trust. Every nail I hit seemed to symbolize something bigger. The building of a shared life, the creation of something solid and lasting. "You're very skilled with your hands," Nathan commented, watching how I handled the hammer with ease. "My father taught me when I was a child," I explained. "Before he died, he said a person should know how to fix the things that break." "He was right," Nathan said. "You certainly know how to fix broken things." His eyes met mine when he said it, and I understood he wasn't just talking about fences or nails. He was talking about us, about how two people, broken by the world's standards, could fix each other. As summer progressed, our routine became a perfectly coordinated dance. I would wake up early to make breakfast, and Nathan would show up at exactly the right time. We would work together in the fields in the morning, have lunch in the shade of the porch, rest during the hottest hours of the day, and go back to work in the late afternoon. But now, there were conversations. Nathan would tell me about his plans to expand the crops, about the changes he wanted to make to the house, about his childhood memories. I would respond with gestures, occasional words, and more frequently, with my own opinions. "What do you think about building a greenhouse over there near the house?" he asked one afternoon, as we looked at the garden we had created together. "To plant all year round?" I asked. "Exactly. That way we could have fresh vegetables even in the winter." The idea excited me. A greenhouse meant long-term planning. It meant Nathan was thinking about the future, a future that apparently included me. "I'd love to help build it," I said, and Nathan smiled in that way that made my heart race. We began to make detailed plans for the greenhouse. Nathan would draw diagrams in the dirt with a stick while I suggested modifications. It was the first time in my life anyone had asked me to be part of planning something important. My opinion mattered. My knowledge of plants and gardening was valued. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Nathan came into the kitchen carrying something in his hands. It was a small clay pot with a rose seedling. "I found this growing wild near the creek," he said. "I thought you might like to plant it in the garden." I took the pot carefully, looking at the small plant. It was a white rose, delicate and fragrant. Something about it touched me deeply. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Like you," Nathan said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Our eyes met for a moment that seemed to last forever. There was something in the air between us, a tension that wasn't uncomfortable, but intense. I felt like we were on the verge of something important, something that would change everything between us. But Nathan pulled away, muttering something about checking on the animals, and the moment broke. I was left alone in the kitchen, holding the rose and trying to understand what had just happened. That night, I planted the white rose next to Victoria's roses. It seemed fitting, the flowers of the past and the present growing side by side. As I dug the hole and settled the delicate roots, I thought about how my life had changed in the last few months. I had arrived here as a flawed woman, sold because I didn't serve the purpose society expected of me. But Nathan had seen me differently from the start. He had recognized something in me that I didn't even know I had, the ability to care, to nurture, to bring life even in the midst of desolation. The weeks turned into months, and our connection deepened in ways I couldn't fully explain. Nathan began to seek me out, not just for work, but for conversation. We would sit on the porch after dinner, watching the stars appear in the dark sky and talking about everything and nothing. "Have you ever thought about having your own land?" he asked one of those nights. The question surprised me. "Women like me don't own land," I answered. "Women like you? Women who can't have children, who don't serve the normal purposes." Nathan turned to look at me directly. "Clara, you need to stop talking about yourself like that." "But it's true." "No, it's not." His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard before. "You are one of the most valuable people I have ever met. What you do for this house, for me, for the plants, for the animals, you bring life wherever you go." I felt tears forming in my eyes again. Nathan continued. "A person's worth isn't in their ability to bear children. It's in their ability to love, to care, to make a difference in the lives of others. And you make all the difference." That night, lying in my bed, I thought for a long time about Nathan's words. For the first time in my life, someone had told me I had value regardless of my condition. I wasn't just tolerated or accepted out of pity, I was truly valued. The next day, Nathan surprised me again. He came into the kitchen during breakfast with a paper in his hands. "I want to show you something," he said, holding out the document. It was the deed to the property. I looked at him, confused, not understanding why he was showing it to me. "I'm thinking of adding your name here," Nathan said, his voice carrying an emotion I couldn't identify. "My name?" "As co-owner. This house, this land, they're as much yours as they are mine now. You brought life back to this place. You deserve to be an owner of it too." I started to tremble. No one had ever offered me anything like this. Property, security, a place that would be truly mine. "Nathan, I can't accept this." "Why not?" Because I don't deserve it." Nathan got up from his chair and came to stand in front of me. His hands gently touched my shoulders. "Clara, when are you going to stop believing you don't deserve good things? When are you going to start seeing what I see when I look at you?" "What do you see?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "I see a strong, brave, caring woman. I see someone who takes broken things and makes them whole again. I see someone who brought hope back to a life that was lost." His hands moved up to touch my face with a gentleness that made me close my eyes. "I see a woman I'm falling in love with." The world stopped. Nathan's words echoed in my mind like ringing bells. He was falling in love with me, the woman everyone considered flawed and useless. I opened my eyes and met his, which were watching me with an intensity that left me breathless. There was love there. True, deep love. The kind I had never imagined anyone could feel for me. "Nathan," I whispered, not knowing what else to say. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said, his hands still on my face. "I just want you to know how I feel. I want you to know that you are precious, valuable, perfect, just the way you are." Tears began to stream down my face. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a happiness I didn't know was possible. Nathan hugged me then, and I felt as if all the broken pieces of my life were finally falling into the right place. In his arms, I wasn't a flawed woman. I was just Clara, and that was enough. Summer was coming to an end when dark clouds began to form on the horizon. Nathan watched the sky with concern during dinner. "It's going to be a big storm," he said. "We need to secure the barn first thing in the morning. If the wind is too strong, it could knock some boards loose." I nodded, already mentally making a list of what we would need to do. We worked well together now, anticipating each other's needs, moving in sync as if we were parts of the same organism. That night, the wind began to blow hard. I was in the kitchen finishing the dishes when I heard the first clap of thunder. The storm was approaching faster than Nathan had predicted. A particularly strong gust shook the whole house, making the windows rattle in their frames. I looked out the window and could see sand and debris being swept up by the wind. This wasn't going to be just an ordinary storm. It was going to be a sandstorm. Nathan appeared in the kitchen, his face tense with worry. "We need to secure the animals now," he said, already grabbing his hat and coat. "If we wait until morning, it'll be too late." Without hesitating, I grabbed my shawl and followed him outside. The wind was so strong I had to hold on to Nathan to keep from being knocked over. Sand was flying everywhere, getting in our eyes and mouths, making it hard to breathe and impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. We ran towards the barn, where the cows, horses, and chickens were getting more and more agitated by the storm. Nathan started moving the larger animals to the most protected part of the barn, while I ran after the chickens, trying to gather them safely. The wind was getting stronger by the minute. One of the large barn doors came loose from its hinges and slammed violently against the wall. Nathan shouted something to me, but his words were swallowed by the roar of the storm. We worked frantically, moving hay, securing equipment, checking that all the animals were safe. The sand was getting in through every crack, creating a dense haze that made it nearly impossible to see. But we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. That's when I heard the crack, a loud sound, like wood splitting. I looked up and saw that one of the main beams in the barn roof was cracking. If it fell, it could hurt the animals or even crush us. "Nathan," I yelled, pointing up. He looked and immediately understood the danger. Without hesitating, he grabbed a ladder and started climbing towards the damaged beam. But the wind was so strong that the ladder was swaying dangerously. "It's too dangerous," I yelled at him. "Come down." But Nathan kept climbing. He grabbed some boards and started trying to reinforce the cracked beam. I held the ladder with all my strength, fighting against the wind that was trying to knock it over. It was in that moment, with the storm roaring around us, with sand whipping our faces and the real danger of serious injury, that something changed between us. We weren't just working together anymore. We were fighting together. We were a real team, each depending on the other to survive. When Nathan finally came down the ladder, he was covered in sweat and sand, but he had managed to stabilize the beam. We looked at each other for a moment, both panting there and exhausted, and I saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't just love or affection. It was deep respect, genuine admiration. "You were amazing," he said, his voice hoarse from shouting against the wind. "I couldn't have done that alone." The storm continued for another 2 hours, but we faced it together. We protected everything that was important, saved all the animals, kept our small property intact against nature's fury. When it finally ended, we were exhausted, dirty, and completely soaked, but victorious. We walked back to the house in silence, both processing what had happened. It wasn't just about the storm. It was about what we discovered about ourselves and each other during those intense hours. On the porch of the house, Nathan stopped and turned to look at me. His eyes were shining with an emotion I recognized immediately, because I felt the same thing. "Clara," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. "Yes? You're not just someone I'm falling in love with. You are my partner, my equal, my—" He paused, searching for the right word. "My soulmate." The world went quiet around us. After all the violence of the storm, that moment of calm felt almost magical. Nathan held out his hand to me, and when I took it, I felt like I was holding my entire future. "I love you, Clara," he said simply. Not in spite of your supposed flaws, but because of who you really are. You are perfect for me. I love you too, I replied, my voice firm and clear for the first time in many years, from the moment you looked at me like I was a real person. There on the porch, covered in sand and exhausted from the battle against the storm, Nathan kissed me. It was a soft, respectful kiss, but full of promises for the future. A future we would build together, as equals, as partners, as two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become whole. After the storm, everything changed between us, not just because we had faced danger together, but because something fundamental had been revealed that night. Nathan no longer saw me as the woman he had bought from Mr. Mitchell. He saw me as his partner, his equal, someone he could trust completely. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of him making coffee in the kitchen. It was unusual. I usually woke up first. When I got to the kitchen, I found Nathan standing by the stove, still wearing the dirty clothes from the pet night before, but with a smile on his face I hadn't seen before. "Good morning, my dear," he said, and the words sounded natural, as if he had always called me that. "Good morning," I replied, feeling my heart race with the intimacy of the moment. He poured coffee for both of us, and we sat at the table. But this time, Nathan didn't sit on the opposite side as he always did. He pulled his chair closer to mine so that our knees almost touched. "We need to talk about last night," he said, his hands wrapped around the warm cup, "about what happened between us." I nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable and necessary. "When I kissed you," Nathan continued, "it wasn't an impulse of the moment. It's something I've been feeling for weeks. You've become the most important person in my life, Clara. I can no longer imagine this place, my life, without you." I felt the tears forming again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "I feel the same way," I admitted. "But Nathan, you have to understand, I've never been loved before. I don't know how to be the woman you deserve." Nathan placed his hand on mine, his fingers intertwining with mine. "You are already exactly the woman I need. You don't need to change anything, Clara. Your way of loving is perfect, quiet, constant, deep. You love me through your actions, through the care you have for everything around you." He was right. I had always shown love through care. I never knew how to do it any other way. And Nathan recognized that. He valued it. "What does this mean for us?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "It means I want to marry you," Nathan said without hesitation. "I want you to be my real wife, not just someone who works in my house. I want to build a real life with you." My heart stopped for a moment. Marriage. A real life. Things I had never dared to dream of for myself. "But Nathan," I said, trying to keep my feet on the ground, "you know I can't give you children. A real family." Nathan stood up and knelt beside me, holding my hands in his. "Clara, look around you. Look at what we've built together in these months. The plants that are blooming, the healthy animals, the house full of life and love. Isn't this a family? Isn't this real?" I looked around the kitchen that had become mine. The clean curtains, the smell of fresh bread, the flowers I had put on the table yesterday morning. It was true. We had created a family, just in a different way from the traditional one. "And what if later you want children?" I asked, still fearful. "Then we'll adopt children who need a home. There are many orphan children in the region, Clara. We could give them what we never had, a home full of unconditional love." Nathan smiled. "Victoria always said that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, about commitment, about loving someone every day." His words touched me deeply. Nathan had found a way to turn my supposed flaw into an opportunity to do good for others. "Do you really want to marry me?" I asked, still hardly believing it. "More than anything in the world," Nathan replied, kissing my hands. "I want to wake up every day by your side. I want to grow old with you. I want you to be my partner in everything." "Then yes," I said, my voice firm and clear, "I will marry you." Nathan stood up and pulled me into his arms, spinning me around the kitchen as we laughed together. It was the first time I had laughed like that, with total abandon, with pure joy, without fear or hesitation. When he put me down, our faces were close, and Nathan kissed me again. This time was different from the kiss the night before. This kiss was full of promises, of a future, of commitment. "When?" I asked when we separated. "Whenever you want," Nathan replied, We can go to town tomorrow to talk to the pastor, if you agree." The idea of getting married so quickly should have scared me, but it didn't. Nathan and I had already been living like a couple for months. We already knew each other deeply, had already faced hardships together, had already built a shared life. The marriage would just be the formalization of what already existed between us. "Tomorrow is perfect," I said. That afternoon, while Nathan took care of the final repairs from the storm, I began to prepare for our trip to town. I chose the most beautiful of Victoria's dresses, a dark green one with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. When I put it on, I felt like a real bride. Nathan found me in the living room, admiring my reflection in the wall mirror. "You look radiant," he said, stopping at the door to watch me. "Victoria would be so happy to know her clothes are being worn on the day of my new wedding." "Do you think she would approve?" I asked, feeling a pang of insecurity. Nathan came over to me and placed his hands on my shoulders, looking at me through the mirror. "Clara, Victoria was a wise and generous woman. She would know immediately that you are special. She would be happy to know I found someone who loves me and takes care of me the way you do." He kissed my forehead gently. "And I'm sure she would love you." That night, we had dinner by candlelight. Nathan had found special candles stored in the cupboard and had lit them to make the evening more special. We talked about our plans for the future, the improvements we wanted to make to the house, the greenhouse we would build, the possibility of adopting children in the future. "I want you to know I will never treat you like Mitchell treated you," Nathan said during dinner. "I will never see you as property or as someone who must submit to me. We are partners in everything." "I know," I replied. "It's one of the things I love most about you, the way you see me as a whole person." The next morning, we woke up early for the trip to town. Nathan had borrowed a more comfortable wagon from a neighbor for the occasion. While he prepared the horses, I finished getting ready and picked a small bouquet of roses I had gathered from the garden, a mix of white and pink roses, symbolizing both the past and the future. The trip to town took 2 hours, and we talked the whole way. Nathan told me stories about his childhood, about how he had met Victoria, about his dreams for the future. I shared memories of my own childhood, spoke about my parents, about the families I had worked for before. "You know what's funny?" Nathan said as he guided the horses. "When Mitchell brought you, I was just expecting someone to help with the chores. I never imagined I would find my soulmate." "Me neither," I admitted. "I thought it would be just another place where I wouldn't be truly wanted." "Well, you were wrong," Nathan said, smiling. "You are more than wanted here. You are essential." We arrived in town around noon. It was a small place with just one main street, a few shops, a church, and the pastor's house. Nathan parked the wagon in front of the church and helped me down. Several people on the street looked at us with curiosity. Some recognized Nathan and waved. Others whispered among themselves when they saw me. I knew they were wondering who I was and what I was doing with Nathan. "Don't worry about them," Nathan whispered, offering me his arm. "Today is our day." Pastor Reynolds was a kind man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He had known Nathan for years and was genuinely happy to hear about our wedding plans. "It's wonderful to see you happy again, Nathan," the pastor said, shaking his hand. "And you, my dear," he said, turning to me, "must be very special to have won this man's heart." "She is," Nathan said, pulling me closer. "Clara brought life back to my home and to my heart." The pastor explained the procedures for the wedding. We would need 2 witnesses, but he knew a couple in town who could help us. The ceremony would be simple but official, and he would be honored to marry us. While the pastor prepared the documents, Nathan and I walked through the small town. He showed me where he had grown up, the school he had attended as a child, the store where his family bought supplies. It was strange and wonderful to see Nathan in his original environment, to better understand who he was before we met. "Want to buy something special for the wedding?" Nathan asked as we passed a small shop that sold jewelry and accessories. "I don't need anything," I replied. "I already have everything I want." Nathan stopped and looked at me with that intense expression I was learning to recognize. "You always say that," he said. "You always act like you don't deserve beautiful things. But you do, Clara. You deserve every good thing life can offer." He took me inside the shop and bought a simple but beautiful ring, a gold band with a small blue stone. When he put it on my finger, I felt like I was receiving much more than a piece of jewelry. I was receiving a symbol that someone had chosen me, valued me enough to make a public commitment to me. The ceremony took place in the late afternoon in the small-town church. Pastor Reynolds was dressed in his best clothes, and the couple who served as our witnesses, the Johnsons, who owned the general store, greeted us warmly. When it was time to say our vows, Nathan held my hands and spoke with an emotion that brought tears to my eyes. Clara, I promise to love and cherish you every day of my life. I promise to always see you as the incredible woman you are, not as the world tried to define you. I promise to build a life with you based on mutual respect, true love, and equal partnership. When it was my turn, the words came from my heart without hesitation. Nathan, I promise to love and care for you with all the strength I have in me. I promise to be your partner in everything, to support you in difficult times, and to share the joys of life by your side. I promise to never doubt the love you have for me and to never stop striving to be worthy of it. You are already worthy, Nathan whispered before the pastor declared us husband and wife. The kiss that sealed our marriage was soft and full of meaning. There in that small church, before God and witnesses, I became Nathan's wife. No longer the flawed woman who had been sold, but a chosen and loved wife. After the ceremony, the Johnsons invited us to have dinner at their home. Mrs. Johnson had prepared a special meal and even a small cake to celebrate our union. It was the first time in my life anyone had thrown a party for me. You make a beautiful couple, Mrs. Johnson said as we served the cake. It's obvious you love each other very much. It's true, Mr. Johnson agreed. Nathan, you look like a completely different man than you were a few months ago. Love really does transform people. Nathan smiled and squeezed my hand. Clara saved me, he said simply. She brought me back to life. He saved me too, I replied, finding the courage to speak. He showed me that I have value. The ride back home was magical. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink colors. Nathan and I spoke little during the trip, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who felt complete with each other. How do you feel, Mrs. Thompson? Nathan asked when we were almost home. Mrs. Thompson? I had a married name now. I had an identity that wasn't based on my shortcomings, but on my relationship with someone who loved me. I feel complete, I answered honestly. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. You always belonged here, Nathan said. From the very first day. It just took me a little while to realize it. When we arrived home, Nathan surprised me once more. He had asked our closest neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, to decorate the house while we were away. There were fresh flowers in every room, lit candles creating a romantic atmosphere, and the table was set with the best china Nathan owned. Did you plan all this? I asked, amazed. I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special, Nathan replied. You deserve to be celebrated, Clara. We had dinner by candlelight, talking about our day, about how we felt as husband and wife, about our plans for the near future. Everything felt different now, not because our relationship had fundamentally changed, but because we now had an official commitment to each other. After dinner, Nathan took me out to the porch where we had shared so many important conversations. The night was clear, with thousands of stars shining above us. I have something I want to give you, Nathan said, taking a small envelope from his pocket. I opened the envelope and found the deed to the property, but now my name was listed as a co-owner, just as Nathan had promised months ago. Now it's official, he said. This house, this land, everything is ours, together. I looked at the document, seeing my name written there in black ink. Clara Thompson, owner. I couldn't hold back the tears. Nathan, this is too much. No, it's not, he interrupted, pulling me into his arms. You worked for this, you cared for all of this, you brought life to this place. It's yours by right. That night, lying together in our bed, which was now truly our bed, Nathan held me in his arms and whispered in my ear. You know the irony of all this? He said. What? Mitchell tried to sell you as if you were flawed, as if you had no value, but you are the most precious thing I have ever had in my life. You're not flawed, Clara. You're perfect. I turned in his arms to look at him directly. How can you see me like this when the rest of the world sees me so differently? Nathan touched my face tenderly. Because I don't look at what you can't do. I look at everything you do. I see how you care for the plants until they bloom. I see how you turned an empty house into a home full of love. I see how you brought me back to life when I was just surviving. He kissed me softly. I see a woman who has the gift of creating life and beauty wherever she goes. That's not a flaw, Clara. That's a miracle. His words touched the deepest part of my soul. My whole life, I had been defined by what I lacked. But Nathan defined me by what I had: love, care, the ability to nurture and create beauty. I love you so much, I whispered. I didn't even know it was possible to love someone like this. I love you too, Nathan answered. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life showing you how valuable you are. Lying there in the darkness, with the soft sound of the wind in the trees outside, I felt as if my life had finally found its purpose. It wasn't the purpose society expected of me, to bear children and serve a husband without question. It was something much deeper and more meaningful. My purpose was to love completely, to care with dedication, to create beauty where there was only desolation. It was to be the partner Nathan needed, the woman who could see him for the incredible man he was and help him heal from the wounds of the past. And Nathan's purpose was to show me my own worth, to protect me from the cruel judgment of the world, to love me exactly as I was. Together, we were whole in a way that neither of us had ever been alone. The next morning, I woke up a married woman. Nathan was already awake, watching me sleep with a smile on his face. "Good morning, my wife," he said, and the words sounded like music. "Good morning, my husband," I replied, still hardly believing I could say those words. We got up together and made breakfast like a real couple. The strange formality of the first few months was gone. Now we moved around the kitchen like two people who belonged there, who belonged to each other. While we ate, Nathan told me about all the plans he had for our life together. The greenhouse we would build, the improvements to the house, the possibility of expanding the property. But more importantly, he talked about the children we might adopt in the future. "There's an orphanage in the next town over," he said. "We could visit in a few weeks, see if there are any children who need a family." The idea excited me deeply. Maybe I couldn't bear children, but I could raise children who needed love. I could be a mother in a different way, but no less valuable. "Do you think I'll be a good mother?" I asked, still insecure. Nathan stopped eating and looked at me with a seriousness that surprised me. "Clara, you're already a mother to everything on this property, to the plants, to the animals, to me when I need care. Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother." His words gave me a confidence I had never felt before. Maybe I really could be a good mother. Maybe my inability to bear children didn't mean I couldn't create a family full of love. That day, we officially began our life as husband and wife. We worked in the fields together, cared for the animals together, prepared meals together. Everything we did was an expression of our partnership, our equality, our mutual love. In the evening, sitting on the porch watching the stars, Nathan pulled me onto his lap and whispered in my ear. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For showing me that true love has nothing to do with perfection. It has to do with finding someone who sees the best in you and helps you become the best version of yourself." In that moment, sitting in the arms of the man who loved me, an owner of the land where I had found my home, the wife of someone who saw me as precious and valuable, I finally understood my true worth. I was not the flawed woman Mitchell had sold. I was Clara Thompson, a whole woman, capable of deep love, of constant care, of creating life and beauty wherever I went. I was exactly who I was meant to be, and I had finally found someone who recognized it. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. The world might see me as flawed, but Nathan saw me as perfect. And his vision had become my own vision of myself. I was valuable, worthy of love, capable of creating a family and a life full of happiness. For the first time in my life, I felt complete.